From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store.
Hi, everyone. Bill Rentschler alongside Kevin Sjuts in the 1011 Now streaming studio. Another edition of the REPORT Husker Show brought to you by Fat Dog's Convenience Store. Kevin, there's a lot that we could get into because there's a lot, you're really busy over the next couple of days. Before we get into the weeds, though, I want to ask you first. I just thought of this because you asked me beforehand. How was the Coliseum? How was your last football stadium crossing off your list? You've been to all of them now.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it was you just feel some of the history. I described it as iconic. Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful day on Saturday for a football game out in California, a little colder than maybe you would expect.
Yeah.
As a weather guy, you'll appreciate this. There were some guys that were working the event on the sidelines wearing gloves. I saw a few winter coats.
I think it was mid-60s for kick, if I remember the forecast correctly.
It was mid-60s. And then, as the game went on and it got a little colder because it became shaded, part of the field was shaded, it got a little chilly. But I'll be honest, I had a button-down shirt with like a little quarter zip over the top. And
you were good.
Kickoff, I was sweating. There were guys wearing gloves.
So the USC guys, whenever they come back to town, they'll be hoping for maybe a late September kick.
Not a November kick.
Let's
just say that people are built a little bit differently. But I thought the Coliseum was really cool, really neat. Now I've gone to all 18 Big Ten venues. I still don't know where I'm going to place them in my conference stadium rankings.
Have to think about it.
It's definitely in the upper half.
You could use that for your two truths and a lie.
Okay.
All 18 Big Ten football stadiums.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think people would understand. They probably expect that to be true of me. It's not in the top 3, but I thought it was really cool. I did walk the steps all the way to the very top for photo purposes, and that was worth it.
Cool.
My hamstrings would not agree with that, but it was worth it. I got about 2/3 of the way up, and I started to breathe a little bit heavier. The legs were getting a little sore, and at that point, there's no turning back. You got to make it all the way.
Yeah. All right. So, like I said, there's a ton we could talk about. We could talk about the football game last Saturday. We talk about the basketball game against St. Mary's last week. But you could also talk about Dana Holgerson. We met him for the first time on Tuesday. You got Creighton Day coming up tomorrow. Men and women taking on Creighton up in Omaha. Hosting Wisconsin, both football and volleyball on Saturday. Very busy time for you guys in the sports department.
We need one of those wheels that you spin, right? And that'll direct our path of the conversation. Let's start, Bill, with Nebraska versus Wisconsin football. The Huskers still seeking bowl eligibility. They've been chasing it for well over a month now. There's been a couple bye weeks in there. There have been a couple heartbreaking losses, including this past Saturday at USC. But win number 6 is still within reach for the Huskers. And Matt Rule says there is nothing he wants more than the breakthrough to occur for these seniors, and it'd be a little bit poetic for it to happen on Senior Day for what could be up to 30 players walking in honor during Senior Day festivities prior to kickoff.
8 consecutive losses now with bowl eligibility on the line for Matt Rule.
That's crazy.
Last year and this year. You would think they would have just lucked into one in that 8-game stretch, but it just has not happened yet. And like you mentioned, for players like Ty Robinson, Isaac Gifford, who maybe could have gone to the NFL last year, came back to try and get this 6th win, it would mean a lot for those guys.
Absolutely. It's going to be an emotional day, and for the fans, I'm very curious to see what the climate is like, and I'm not talking about the weather. Just what's the mood of the fan base? Mm-hmm. Obviously, this fan base has been very restless over the past few weeks. There have been some people that have gotten hypercritical of Nebraska football because of the inability to get win number 6. Yet it's also the final home game, and that is to be celebrated. There's a senior class that has gone through a coaching change. In some instances, they've had 4 or 5 different position coaches over a career. And if nothing else, give those individuals a round of applause, because that's not easy. Think about your job. If you were to have constant change of your supervisor or boss, like, that is super tough. And the portal is open. These guys could have left, but so many of them at Nebraska stayed. And that was a big headline from the 2023 season to the 2024 season at Nebraska. Despite a 5-7 record, a lot of players doubled down and decided to stay at Nebraska. In fact, as the transfer portal numbers went crazy nationwide, they were insanely low at Nebraska. Only a few players left the program, and many of those who opted to come back to Lincoln are seniors or upperclassmen. And for those that are going to be outgoing following this season, they hope that their final few games at Nebraska aren't just over the next 2 weeks. They really want to get the month of December to practice and then go to a postseason contest.
And I kind of appreciate, I kind of sensed a little bit of a change, and I heard it first in Raiola. Just sort of speaking it into existence, not necessarily taking the question of, the sixth win. He goes, yeah, we're going to go to a bowl game. Yeah, we're going to go to a bowl game. And not trying to make it the big to-do that it is for the fans, but just being like, yeah, we're going to go. And Rule, even today when he said Tommy Hill, is out, said he could be back for bowl practice. So just sort of speaking it into existence.
I think these players truly believe that they are going to go to a bowl game. They've believed that since they were 5-1, Bill.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody expected them to be, in mid-November staring down the barrel of 2 final games against what used to be divisional opponents in 2 programs that the Huskers have not had the most success against. But they got to get one of 2. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Interesting to point out that the way Dylan Raiola, he didn't pound the table and say, we will go to a bowl game. And it wasn't a very, forthright promise. It was just in passing, and it was a window into his confidence that there's still a win out there in his mind.
And so Wisconsin is not without its, drama kind of on their side. They fired their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, after they lost. Again, they played number 1 Oregon, and they held them to 16 points. They lost 16-13, but Luke Fickell fires his offensive coordinator, and his availability this week, he wouldn't really name a play caller. It's going to be kind of by committee, so Wisconsin might look a little different. Again, Phil Longo would run the air raid, and you think air raid in Wisconsin, those don't go together.
It's not going to be by committee. Somebody's going to have the play calling responsibility on Saturday, and it may be Luke Fickell, but there's no way they can do it on Saturday. The operation of everything would be ridiculous because you would have disagreeing opinions on whether to throw on 3rd and 3 or run. And who gets so again, there has to be a designated play caller. And they've not come out to say it. And even if you watch Luke Fickell's news conference from this week, it was very a little bit puzzling to me. He didn't seem comfortable. The media up in Madison, they were very focused on that whole situation, play calling, offensive coordinator, philosophy offensively for this game. Nothing was even spoken about Nebraska. But this is a fascinating matchup because the winner secures bowl eligibility. Both these teams are 5-5. Nebraska has lost 4 in a row. Wisconsin has lost 3 in a row. There have been close losses on both sides. And I think a lot of people forget, Bill, this is a trophy game. People here forget about that because Nebraska's possessed that trophy only one time. It's the Freedom Trophy. And the Huskers' lone win in this series as conference opponents came back in 2012.
That was Rex Burkhead, Taylor Martinez. They were down that game. That was the alternate uniform game.
Yes.
I didn't like those.
Some people did not like those uniforms. Alonzo Whaley had a huge stop for Nebraska as Wisconsin went for it on 4th down near the end of the game. And it was a big scene as Nebraska defeated Wisconsin. No one knew on September 29th, I believe, 2012, that would be the lone win in that series for the Huskers over the next 12 years.
Yeah. And so coming in, Nebraska's 1.5 point favorites in this. Over under is 42.5, so it's going to be a 23-20 type of 24-21 type of game. I was kind of surprised that they were favorites, to be honest.
I'm not surprised because the home team always gets 3 points, or so they say. I was more fascinated by the over-under line. What did you say, 43?
42.5.
42.5. I think that sounds about right. Wisconsin has a really nice defense. They're really good against the pass. Matt Rule said that this is one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. So I don't think that this is going to be a shootout by any means, but you got to figure there's going to be, it's going to be a field position game, and that's kind of what folks would expect from a traditional Nebraska-Wisconsin game, but there is nothing traditional about this matchup.
No, and Wisconsin, again, they got another, running back. They're kind of a running back factory, it feels like. Tawi Walker, I believe is his name. They had Ches Malushi, I think is his name. He left the program earlier in the year. But again, Walker's got over 700 yards, 10 touchdowns so far in the season. And
if you want a name to follow for Wisconsin, it's Hunter Wooler. He's a defensive player for them, leads the team in tackles. He's probably going to be an All-Big Ten selection as a return man as well. And I feel like he's been at Wisconsin for the past 8 years, and he's a nice player. He's just kind of all over the field, and that players like that have been synonymous with Wisconsin over the course of time. I find it fascinating with this match because there are just so many different elements to it. It's not two elite programs. It's two wins playing for a bowl game. I would almost liken this to a bowl game. And sometimes when you're trying to pick a game in December and January, it's wise to evaluate the care factor. Sometimes teams get into a game, and frankly, there's not a whole lot of motivation. Just getting to the bowl game was the motivation, and then they don't play well whenever they're on site. I think that you could look at this game from an emotional standpoint. Who has the emotional advantage? And I would give that to Nebraska because of the senior class, because of the ginormous, not monkey, but gorilla on the back, and to be able to possibly get it off at home. However, with using the recent 8 seasons as history and as a barometer here, sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes the pressure becomes too much, and there are those mental demons that Matt Rule has tried to exercise from this year's team. But I do think close game, not a whole lot of separation. Stylistically, fascinating matchup. Nebraska's going to throw the ball. Wisconsin's good at defending the pass. So I go down to some of the intangibles and the emotional factor, and I think that the advantage goes to the Huskers.
So Dana Holgorsen, heard from him for the first time this week. He'll, obviously, someone I think asked the question in Rule's press conference maybe on Monday, but they say the biggest jump comes from week 1 to week 2 at the beginning of the year, and last week was Dana Holgorsen's first week, so this is kind of his week 2. Should we expect to see a jump? He was very direct in his sort of his press availability the other day. Said wide receiver blocking on the perimeter was embarrassing, and the players got to make plays. So a little bit of a different tone now coming from that offensive coordinator.
I think what was so shocking with Dana Holgorsen's news conference was the fact that Matt Rule often tries to filter and shield players, doesn't like to call them out publicly, and when he does, it's very intentional and with a purpose. Dana Holgorsen did not seem to have that filter at all, and I think that's just how he is as a coach and maybe as a person, because as the week has gone on, we've learned more that Dana's not afraid to say things during practice and get on guys. And he's pretty black and white and insanely blunt. And I think that that's been a big shift for this team, especially for some of the youth on the team, specifically on offense. Dylan Rilo is a freshman quarterback. Carter Nelson is a freshman wide receiver. You have some other underclassmen playing. Emma Johnson's a sophomore running back. So I think that there have been some cages that have been rattled. And the hope here is that it produces a positive result for this team. But it was when he started talking, I think everybody in that room, the butts went to the front of the seats and the posture perked up a little bit, because you're like, okay. Because he starts calling, and it's also fascinating that he doesn't know everybody's name. So he calls them 4 and 18 and 29. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's a coach.
Yeah, it is.
When you watch film, you don't learn the opposing. Well, that's Smith or that's Anderson on the
That's 18.
No, it's 81. And so he was evaluating and speaking about his team the way most coaches do about opposing teams. And again, he didn't hold back in his assessment of things.
I also liked how someone had asked him, why Nebraska? Why now? Because I was just bored. I didn't like not having some sort of semblance of control, calling plays or whatever it was.
I feel like some of that was tongue in cheek.
A little bit.
I think there's some truth there that, he wanted to be a little bit more involved with the football program. But I also feel like, because even after he said, I was bored, he kind of laughed and chuckled, and then he continued his thought. So it wasn't just a, 2-second, here's my quote, period, end. No, there was actually like 2 minutes of reasoning and thought-provoking discourse following.
And so he was a good listen. He was very blunt, to the point, direct. So that was an interesting listen on Tuesday. Have to see if it carries over, though, into the game. Kind of like he was saying, the players have to make the plays.
Yep, and I think if there's anybody who maybe will benefit from just the tone and demeanor of Dana Holgorsen, it's going to be Nebraska's wide receivers. And I don't say that just because that's who he singled out on Tuesday when he was talking with reporters. I think it's because they have big bodies, they have talent, and they have experience in the wide receiver room. Maybe they were a little bit too comfortable, and he's gotten them way out of their comfort zone. And it has been documented throughout this season that some of the issues in Nebraska's passing game has been the guys on the edge winning their one-on-ones and creating separation. So maybe with the message that Dana Holgorsen brings and the accountability he's holding these players to, it is going to really heighten the sense of urgency and the level of execution from Nebraska's wide receivers. And if that happens, hopefully there's an upswing from Dylan Raiola, because Dylan has regressed as the season has gone on. And I did the math. I mean, it's not too difficult a math to do, but he's thrown 10 interceptions, Dylan has, to 11 touchdowns. And early in the season, the touchdown-to-interception ratio was very favorable for him. So maybe by guys getting open downfield, Dylan's completion percentage goes up, there's more yards to be gained, the Huskers stay ahead of the chains, and the turnovers go down.
So 2:30 kick, who do we got on the call? Big Ten Network?
Great question. But thankfully I have my paper.
Yeah.
It's Jeff Levering on the play-by-play and Jake Butt as the analyst. Jake Butt does a lot of their studio work as well. He's a Michigan guy, but he's been pretty even on Nebraska. He's not a big Nebraska proponent, and he's not too critical on them. But he was really breaking down Nebraska-Wisconsin earlier this week on BTN's studio show and just saying how, one of these teams is due to go on some sort of run here over the final 2 weeks.
I'm kind of disappointed. I was a big fan of Matt Millen. I haven't had Matt Millen on any of the calls so far this year, I don't think. So,
but Jason Benetti, play-by-play last week, what'd you think?
He was good. I was also trying to watch the game whilst at a wedding and at a wedding reception, so the volume was down a little bit. So, and I was
fall weddings, they're dangerous.
I know. I swore I thought the wedding was on a bye week, but then it obviously turned out not to be. So you guys are going to obviously be down Memorial Stadium, 2:30 kick. You're going to turn right around and head on down to Devaney, 7 o'clock, Nebraska, Wisconsin, volleyball, number 2 versus number 6. Part 2 this season.
And that's a big one. It's a big one because Nebraska is staring down the end of the regular season schedule. 3 games are left.
3?
Isn't that crazy? And Wisconsin right now is still in contention for the Big Ten championship. And if they want any hopes of winning the title, they have to beat Nebraska on Saturday. And this is a team that has a National Player of the Year. They have a team that is very experienced, yet they have a freshman setter who is elite with a capital E. And Wisconsin just won a 5-set, very entertaining thriller on Wednesday night. 20-18 was set number 5 between the Badgers and the Golden Gophers. Had Wisconsin lost, they would have essentially been eliminated from the Big Ten championship contention, but they won it on their home floor, and now they're coming to Lincoln. They're going to be excited, and I think that whole redemption factor, if you look at the matchup from the Wisconsin perspective, it's going to be pretty high because they did not play well when the Huskers went to Madison earlier this season.
A very surprising sweep. I don't think anyone would have said it would have been a sweep in either direction. Probably more bets that it would have been a 5-set match as opposed to a sweep. So Nebraska is 17-0 in the conference. Wisconsin's 15-2 in the conference. In between them there, you have Penn State. They're 15-1 in the conference, and the Huskers have Penn State next week.
So as we mentioned, Bill, Nebraska volleyball has 3 games left in the regular season. 2 of those 3 opponents are the 2 teams directly behind them in the conference race. So as a volleyball fan, this is fantastic. For John Cook, this makes your stomach go nuts, correct?
It's high drama.
It is high drama, and there exists a scenario in which Nebraska, if they are to beat Wisconsin at home on Saturday, their next match is Penn State in Happy Valley A win there on Friday night, the Friday after Thanksgiving, would give Nebraska the Big Ten regular season championship.
Yeah, de facto Big Ten championship game.
And the Big Ten, winning the Big Ten was going to be harder this year than any other season because of the additions from the West Coast.
Yeah.
Bringing in Oregon, bringing in Washington, bringing in UCLA, bringing in USC. There are some perennial power college volleyball programs, and the Huskers have not skipped a beat this year. You mentioned 17-0 in the conference, Bill. They're on a 24-game winning streak in this season. I believe they're 27-1.
Pretty impressive. Also, senior night for John Cook and his squad. Players like Merritt Beeson, Taylor Landfair, Lexi Rodriguez. Their last time during the regular season, they're more than likely going to host the regional play, so they'll still be playing there. But last time on the Husker floor, and not the NCAA floor for John Cook and his squad.
Yeah, Lexi Rodriguez is going to get quite the ovation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to disrespect any other senior that's going to get recognized. There is a reason why they do senior day after the match, because it's going to be emotional.
Yeah.
And, Lexi Rodriguez has poured her heart and soul, and you could maybe argue she's one of the most recognizable Nebraska volleyball players of all time.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jordan Larson is going to be at the top of that list. Kelsey Robinson, just based on some of their, international success. Michaela Fecchi, I would put in that conversation. But in terms of Lexi Rodriguez, not only being a four-time All-Conference, four-time All-American, she's had the benefit of name, image, and likeness. And she has been a poster child for Nebraska volleyball over her career. And there are so many little girls across the state that absolutely idolize Lexi Rodriguez. And it goes beyond her being a tremendous volleyball player. It's also just some of the endorsements and the deals that she has. And you see her picture as you're walking into the local grocery store. There's just so much about Lexi to be liked.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been so many people that have just fallen in love with her. So there will likely be some tears shed on Saturday.
Yeah, so that will be, you guys will have a busy night Saturday night. Really quickly, want to touch on, because all the J-Skers, tomorrow is their day. Nebraska versus Creighton women's basketball and men's basketball. I believe the women are playing first, Kevin.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock, and then the men at, I believe, 7 o'clock. The women are undefeated, but Amy Williams, they lost Natalie Potts, season-ending injury. The men, they had a good game against St. Mary's. Unfortunately, fell short. Kind of how you size up the basketball programs?
I will contend that this is a bigger game for the Nebraska women's basketball team than the men. If the men lose it, they played a top 15 team on the road, a team that has right now the National Player of the Year in Ryan Kalkbrenner. And no goals are thwarted if the Nebraska men go to Creighton and lose, and even lose by 25. So what?
Yeah.
It's a chance to build the resume, but it's also not going to hurt you. I think for the women, because they are undefeated, they are nationally ranked, and they are continuing to build confidence here early in this season, especially with some of the young players they're playing, and now having to deal with the unfortunate news of Natalie Potts being out for the remainder of the season. She leads the team in scoring, Bill. So she has a torn ACL. It was suffered on a non-contact situation on Tuesday at Pinnacle Bank Arena. So the Huskers need to overcome that loss of Natalie Potts. They need to continue to build. Players like Britt Prince will continue to get experience. She's also playing close to home. There's a lot at stake for this women's team. Plus, Creighton women's basketball has been really, really good over the last couple of years, and they have some fifth-year seniors that have been a part of NCAA tournament teams. There's a lot to be gained for Amy Williams' team.
Mm-hmm. So it'll be fascinating to see how both of those games play out. Obviously, you guys will have coverage tomorrow. And then you'll obviously have coverage of everything that's going on Saturday.
So what you're telling me is we're not going to sleep for 36 hours.
Nope. You're going to be busy. The good news for you though is Mark Manning and they're on the road. They're in the Navy Classic, I believe. So you don't have to cover them this weekend.
Okay.
Top 5 team for Mark Manning.
Oh yeah, they're good.
Yeah,
they're really fun. They're going to contend for a Big Ten championship. I know Iowa and Penn State are in there as well, but hey, this Nebraska wrestling team, they're no joke.
All right. And then I guess really quickly, I mean, we have high school playoffs, football playoffs coming up here.
State championships next Monday and Tuesday.
Monday? All right. So, yeah, not just 36 hours, like 72 hours.
The 6-man championship out in Kearney is Friday night at 7 o'clock. And then the 8-man championships are Monday morning and afternoon. The Class A championship, which, oh boy, you better get ready to watch some high-level football. It's Omaha Westside versus Millard South. Those are the two teams that have been 1-2 the entire year. That is going to be a heavyweight prize fight. That's at 7:15 on Monday at Memorial Stadium. As for local teams in the state finals, Wahoo and Bishop Neumann. So the whole town of Wahoo, no one's going to be home on Tuesday. Central City makes the finals. Sandy Creek is in the state finals. Central Valley is in the state finals. So we've got a lot of 10-11 area squads that are going to be playing at Memorial Stadium.
I'd imagine you'd probably put this week up there on the list of busiest times of the year for you guys in the sports department.
Well, November just in general. It's crossover season because basketball joins in with volleyball and football. In high school, playoffs really kick in. We usually there's state volleyball in there as well. We've cleared that hurdle. But, yeah, there's a lot going on, and don't want to make that sound like a complaint. That's there's a lot of it. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's great stuff.
Well, then we'll let you get back to it. We appreciate your time as always, Kevin. Appreciate everyone for tuning in, watching another edition of the REPORT Husker Show. Again, brought to you by Fat Dog's Convenience Store. Until next time, hope everyone has a nice Thursday.
You've been listening to the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch the REPORT on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10.